Yes, I can.
Okay, testing.
Good, I did it this time, so that's a good reminder, everyone. You have your mic in front of you, unmute by pushing the button. And Sarah had the idea to go around quickly and just introduce ourselves one more time since Karen Grove has joined us as our 11th member, so which is wonderful. I'm Jill Delano. I'll pass it.
Margaret Jones.
I'm Karen Grove.
And Sarah Scrivenich, another co-chair.
Courtney Sukford.
Will Addis. And I don't know if you want to do all.
Ray Gracie.
Janice Eason.
Mary Beth Thomas. Peter Lindquist.
Great, we have a wonderful turnout, so thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to pass it to Sarah. She has a number of items to go over.
We promised to keep housekeeping items a little bit shorter. Last week was obviously introductions and setting the tone for this budget committee and getting some of the background in terms of building on our meeting last week. One of the, we thought most important housekeeping item was Jill and I spoke, got some feedback, and given the length of time and what we're trying to accomplish in brain power and attention, we felt that any budgets that aren't presented by 8:30 won't be presented in the session that we're sitting in. So meaning that if it's before 8:30 and we get to a fresh budget, we'll reserve the remaining of that time to talk through it. But last week we were hedging on, 3 minutes to 9, and it was just getting to be much. So if everyone is comfortable, I don't know if we need a formal vote on that. Does anybody strongly object to the approach of no new budgets after 8:30? Okay. And then I think go ahead. Was someone online? Okay. And then I think building on that, we will also be mindful, because again, I think what we'll also get into more detail around is the questions that we ask, how we approach these budgets. That's really a very critical part of our role. So we don't want to limit questions and just move through these things, but we also Jill and I will be keeping, track of how are we pacing. And if we start to get through this session and even next session and feel like we're getting pretty far behind, I think we can revisit if we have to start something early, or we'll come back together as a group to figure out how to accomplish what our goal is. But for the purpose of tonight, by 8:30, if it hasn't been presented, we will move on. And then is there anything else in terms of, I know there's been some questions and in terms of our role. We talked about our role last week. I know that there's newer members of this committee and longtime residents of Camden. And I just want to open up the floor, I think, before we get in, if there's any questions that want to be raised, and also, again, to encourage folks to ask questions as we move through, related obviously specifically to the budget. But is there anything before we start that anybody wants to share?
Yes, sir. I want to say that I'm going to be sliding off the budget committee because I decided to run for the select board. And I think that would be something that I'm interested in. So just so you know, I'm going to fade away. But thanks.
So,
Is there a conflict?
not until Mary Beth's elected. So, Mary Beth, are you planning to serve the remainder of your term for this year?
No,
certainly there's enough now with 11 people, then, more people have come on. And I don't even know if I'm going to get voted on. I don't even know if I'm going to get the 35 signatures, but it's something I'm going to pursue. So that's where I'm going to put my effort at this point. And the budget committee certainly is well represented, so it doesn't need my presence. But thanks.
Well, thank you for your time, Mary Beth. And if
Great.
you want to, if you want to stay on, it certainly wouldn't be a conflict or anything. So I just want to make that very clear.
Sure. Thanks.
Anything else before we start?
I'm wondering, sorry if I should mute this. Would somebody online mind speaking? Because I think we're in the room, the sound was very loud. So
Can you hear me?
Okay, you can turn it a little bit up, yeah.
You can, I muted this screen, so.
I'll turn it back up then.
Yeah. Just so we're not
We
blasting.
wanted to hear your voices, but we were getting it over 2 screens, so it was like a symphony of. Okay, so with that,
Somebody has their hand.
Ray,
Ray,
he's on mute.
you're muted.
I'm not looking at that. I'm sorry, I did keep on not looking at the mute thing. If we are down to 10 members of the board and there's a 5-5 vote, how is that going to be determined or decided?
By trying to convince Mary Beth to stay on for the next 3 weeks? No. Well, maybe we could take it offline, or, yeah, I mean, is there, what's the formal rule on it? Okay.
That's just a
Ray, I know in the past, when it gets posted on the warrant, it can say 50-50 on the budget committee.
okay. Thank you.
Can it still?
No, so the way that it would go on the warrant, and, and I'm thinking this will, like, when there's a split vote, it would probably apply more to each individual budget than what you come up with for an overall vote. So yeah, you're just gonna have to keep revoting till you have a majority if there's half and half. And I think we ran into this a few times in the past when we didn't have, the full membership of the budget committee and it was an even number of people.
Okay.
Do we want to ask the select board to, since we did with Karen, ask to add another candidate if there is another candidate?
Good question. I was gonna ask everyone.
I don't know
that.
when does the select board next meet?
The 21st. So it would be right before the last meeting of,
Can they do it like, not like, I don't know, over unofficially? Like, could someone
they
participate?
could have like a special select board meeting and do it.
I'm gonna opt to say, let's proceed with the budgets, and we can take offline, confirm, Mary Beth, your timing and intentions. Not that I'm gonna be adding any of that, and then we can talk through and we can send an email out in fairness to everybody in terms of just where things stand. There's gonna be a few other votes that we'll have to talk about anyway with recusing ourselves and firefighting. So I think let's proceed with the business at hand, and then we can formalize that. Okay. You gave us a swear, is there a new swearing in that,
Oh, there were just a few members who needed to
Okay, so-
formally,
okay.
and those sheets have been sent around. So I think it was Jill, Karen, Sarah, and Andy. So you can just hand them back to me and I'll
need to sign
I'll have the clerk sign them.
okay.
Do you want to turn it over to you to get going with codes and planning?
Certainly. So yeah, Jeremy is our first department head that's presenting today, and apologies.
All right.
So
All right,
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
bring up your presentation.
Code and planning, planning and development. Yep.
So while Audra's doing that, I just wanted to let everyone know, it was emailed as well, but we have copies here of the budget. It's also in the binder, but what Jody has done is put it with the associated revenues as well. So, and it's also a bigger font, which I appreciate. So if everyone has that PDF from their email from either today or yesterday, I can't remember. And then we have copies here. I think it's on the 3rd page for planning, code enforcement, and they're all together on the same budget. So we're all in the same place.
All right. Thank you. Again, my name's Jeremy Martin, Planning and Development Director for the town. I'm going to try to breeze right through this because I know most of you have heard this before from me. And probably too long version before. So I'm the planning and development director. I've been with the town for 5 years now. I oversee, again, planning and development, and we do all of planning and development work for the town, as well as code enforcement, inspections, and as far as that goes, we administer the building code, the shoreline zoning ordinance, the zoning ordinance, floodplain management, the growth management program for the town, the comp plan, kind of all those things. And so I see us as kind of the two core functions, our planning development that can include economic development, community development, and again, code enforcement. And when it comes to code enforcement, again, it's permits and inspections. We roughly do about 700 permits a year, about 690 or so permits is what we do a year. It's a pretty busy office. And again, that's everything from building and plumbing and electrical to shoreline zoning. And we have to do inspections. We now do erosion control inspections. We do a lot of that stuff. We also provide licensing inspection services for all the facilities in town, businesses that get annual licenses like victualers and lodging and special amusements and those kind of things. We also provide technical assistance to the planning board and the zoning board, and kind of staff those departments or those boards. We also provide other technical support to other boards and committees in town, including the Historic Resources Committee when they need us. And where else? Where am I? I can't see. And also we deal with phone calls every day from realtors, property owners, builders, contractors, architects, lawyers. We field dozens of those a week, and they can be very simple questions to very complex questions. And planning, from the planning side, we have been working on ordinance development work this year. That's kind of a big focus of us, of what things that we do. We're working on the street opening ordinance along with Dave from Public Works. We're also, I've worked on a business licensing ordinance that's hopefully going to go to voters this year. We have 9 ordinances that regulate all these businesses and towns that we have. And we've got 9 separate chapters, and we're going to try to consolidate those into one chapter and make it a more streamlined approach. So that is something that's moving forward. We're working on housing affordability. I know you mentioned housing issues last week. The state legislature last year passed LD 2003, which mandates housing changes for every municipality in the state. It's fairly complicated. That is supposed to go into effect July 1. We're still working on that. We did a lot in the last few years. If you can remember when folks voted, we did a lot on housing, increased density, give people more opportunities, accessory apartments, those kinds of things. We did that. We are working on the floodplain management program. We're looking at becoming part of the community rating system, which is a federal program, which would give folks that live in the floodplain, that have properties in the floodplain, a reduced rate on their flood insurance if the town meets certain criteria. So we're working on that. It's pretty significant. If people live in the flood zone or have buildings in there, obviously, if you do, insurance rates are through the roof for those. And so the idea is to try to bring those down by, being proactive on the flood side. Comp plan, we work on implementing the comp plan, amending it, and we'll need to do an update in like 4 years. It's kind of coming fast. And we've also been working on climate change and sea level resiliency planning and adaptation work. We are working on the municipal property side, looking at the public landing, steamboat landing, harbor park, and other municipal infrastructure. We are also looking at doing a harbor-wide resiliency plan in the works. We are looking at stormwater and low-impact development. What we see is significant impacts. Obviously, everyone's seeing the storm surge and sea level rise, but we're also seeing these increased storm events are having significant impacts on streams and catch basins and storm sewers and storm drains. So we're going to try to see what we can do to kind of address that on the land side. And we are also responsible for the new traffic calming program that the town and the select board adopted this year. And I've got 2 neighborhoods that are working on that right now with us, which is kind of neat. And the snowball, I've been very active in working on the snowball permitting side with some consultants in the DEP and working with Beth on kind of continued planning, long-term planning for the snowball as well. Some of the other stuff we've dealt with on the snowball side is the big storm event that happened a year ago this past October. Impacted the snowball pretty significantly. So we've been working with FEMA on getting some FEMA funds to repair some of the damage over there. That's been a long process. We're still going through it, and that's been over a year and 5 months now. So we still haven't seen the funds yet, but we're working on it. What else? Again, trying not to be as drawn out as last time. We are working on the downtown master plan implementation. We're looking at public landing improvements. Part of that, we're looking at the governor's funding for the climate resiliency partnership, that they're funding a lot of projects. We are looking at that right now. And also one thing that we've done is looking at town property development opportunities, the Tannery, Sagamore Farm, and then other town-owned properties that are vacant. We're looking at opportunities for those. This last year, we also saw the Tannery get finally cleaned up. We finished that project. It was a very long in the works, and we're finally done, which is good. We still have some final paperwork to do with the state side, but we're done with the grant and the feds on that, and it turned out pretty well. And I've been working with Margaret's mobile home community park, the Mountainside Community Park, on a sewer extension for them. They have a pretty old septic system, and it gets pumped daily, multiple times daily. It's kind of a crazy thing. So we're working on that. We're looking at trying to get some federal funding for that pretty quickly, actually. And again, some of our other partners I work with is the Coastal Mountain Land Trust on projects that they have going, McNemba, the Mountain Bike Association, who has trails up at the Snowball, and Camden Area Business Group, and the Maine Outdoor Film Festival, which we bring in annually every September. And they have outdoor films at the amphitheater at the library, which is kind of cool. Again, some other projects here, 105 sidewalk, that there was an MDOT locally administered project. I was kind of very integral to make that happen. We had to do a taking. It was a very eminent domain. It was quite a long project, and that's well underway, and it's going to get finished this year. And part doing assisted in the downtown parking, paid parking management study program. And we're right now in the thick of looking at damage assessments again with FEMA for the December storm this year at all of our property on the waterfront. I think that's pretty much it. We are looking at what are things we can do in our zoning ordinance to protect resources, water quality, and those kinds of things. So we'll be working with the Conservation Commission, hopefully, or committee on that. And that's ongoing. And then just budget notes. We are obviously a personnel heavy side of the budget. 97% of our budget is wages and benefits. And we have myself, we have a planner, Shenley Neely, and our code officer is Clint Beveridge. And we have Jeannie Hollingsworth. She's an administrative assistant for us, and she splits her time. She's part-time, and she splits her time with the assessing department as well. It's great to have Clint. I will say he was a firefighter here in town, and now he's a code officer, and it's working out very well. I've been here for 5 years, and we are on our 5th code enforcement officer in 5 years. So it's been a long time to get to where we need to be, and we're exactly where we need to be with Clint. He's a great employee and dedicated, and it's working out very well. I'm a code officer as well, so I'm able to now step way far away from that stuff and do some of the other work that's been needed to be done. And as I said earlier, this last year we did 670 permits. We're going to be up to about 700 or so this year. Back in 2019, it was only 480. We're seeing a lot of work happening, lots of value coming into town. Our estimated revenues this year, I think Audra and I put in 124,000 or 122,000 or so worth of revenue coming through our permits. And we are constantly looking at our fee schedule. And we firmly believe that, people that are doing projects should be paying for the services that we're providing. So it's not falling back on the taxpayers. So we're trying to make sure that our fees are appropriate for the projects and the time that goes into them. The building code and the energy code and shoreline zoning and all the zoning that goes into it is oftentimes very complicated, very extensive. Projects generally get 12 inspections, maybe more, sometimes 14, 15, 16 on a house. So we're at these houses a lot. Doing a lot of work. So we are constantly looking at fee schedule. And on the enforcement side, we are also making sure people are doing what they're supposed to do. I think everyone is well familiar probably now with the issue of the herbicide application over on Metcalf Road. I've been very involved in that. And when need be, and just bring this up from a revenue side, we did also took action against the property owner on Atlantic Avenue a couple of years ago. And we brought in, I think it was like $26,000 in penalties on that situation or that issue. And on Metcalf, we're going to be, I think, well higher than that when that comes to a head and we get into a consent agreement with them. So our budget's 97% personnel. Most of it is anything beyond the personnel is certifications and continuing education that we're required to have, and then office supplies primarily. We are asking our vehicle mileage line came down. I think it was 1,500 off the top of my head. I think it's 1,500. Came down a little bit this year because we are asking for funds from the capital reserve account from the capital account for an electric vehicle for our code officer. He spends a lot of time on the road doing inspections in and around town always. And it would be good to get him a vehicle that is a town-owned vehicle. And we've asked for $35,000 from capital accounts. And we're going to be, we did receive a governor's climate resiliency programs funding of $2,000 from them for this. And we'll be using Efficiency Maine incentives as well. So we'll be getting $9,500 from the state to go towards an electric vehicle as well on top of that 35. Again, there's 4 of us in the office and one of them is part-time with us and Jeannie shares her time with assessing. That's all I
I
got.
think that's a good lead in to sort of the biggest line item,
Sure.
which is the full-time wages.
Yep.
I know last year, if I'm not wrong, you were looking to hire an assistant code enforcement officer that we approved or that we
Hired
rolled into
an
the
assistant planner is what was in
assistant
the budget.
planner.
Yeah.
So that's that
Shenley.
Shenley.
Yep.
Okay, good.
And we brought her on, I will say it was like halfway. We brought her on in October, end of October this year. So we had budgeted last year, but we brought her on in October.
Okay, so our year-to-date should be a little less
Yep,
than.
correct.
And then my other question is that the increase in that line item is more than the 8.7 COLA increase. And maybe you guys can tell us a little bit about that and what we're looking at there.
Yeah, so with the full-time wages, and this was reflected, I think, also in the FY23 budget. So another change was that Carrie Leishman used to be an employee of the town of Rockport, and there was a contract where Camden reimbursed Rockport for his services, but that's flipped. So now he's a Camden employee, and we get reimbursed by the town of Rockport for Carrie's services.
And I will say just, our budget is code planning and assessing. And so Carrie and I kind of split our stuff out and that's why different accounts are what they are. But the personnel shows up for the entirety of code planning and assessing in that line, in that budget line.
maybe I missed this, but how does that account for the different percentage?
Oh, you mean the bottom line percentage increase?
Yeah.
So even if the wages are increased by 8.7%, the bottom line budget at the end can end up being higher than that if there are other increases, or, if the proportion of the overall budget is greater. So the wage increase doesn't necessarily equate to the overall bottom line
Right.
increase for that particular budget.
Okay, yes, I thought Jill, you were asking specifically about the wages. Is that correct? Or are you talking about the overall?
That overall line
Okay,
item,
got
but
it.
I think that explains it when you look at this sheet.
If you take 495,000.
Yeah.
Past our last budget of 432,000. Is that what you're looking for? You're looking to just find the delta?
No, and I understand. So if you look at the revenue side, which I think this is why this sheet that you provided tonight was very helpful, especially in this case, because you can see that Rockport is now reimbursing us $110,300 for carry, correct?
Yeah, and also the city of Rockland also reimburses us for carrying Caitlin too, and that was new. That wasn't reflected in last year's budget because that agreement wasn't done in time for the process with the budget committee, but it is this year. So,
And Karen, did you have a?
No, pretty much things were answered with the exception of you mentioned Sagamore Farm. Is that something you're researching? I'm sorry. Is that something you're researching on what you do next with Sagamore Farms, or is that?
I just throw it out there
Okay,
because it is a town property. It's an asset. It's the select board in the past, as recently as 2 years ago, asked me to do a RFI. It's a request for information, and then they didn't do anything with it.
Okay.
I just think it's important to include because it is a pretty significant property that the town has. And, when we talk about housing and other issues and other needs we have in town, there's not a lot of vacant land. And we certainly don't have a lot of, other land, large parcels that are town owned other than Sagamore Farm.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I understand that it is also a beloved piece of property for some folks, and they use it and hike it and mountain bike it and all that. But
I have a question, but I want to make sure I'm looking at the screen is anybody online have a question before I ask my next one? Okay. I see Shay. This is, and you mentioned a couple of projects and this might just be where does it work into the different budgets, but I know last year when we talked about, the paying for parking assessment, and I know there was funds related to potential, money that was going to be used at the Snow Bowl. You mentioned several programs and improvements. Is that tied to the efforts of what you're doing, or are we going to be kind of looking at those more when we get into the specific budgets related to?
I think there'll be more in specific budgets when we move forward. Like the paid parking program, that revenue from that or the cost from that doesn't come out of the planning and development department.
Right.
We just provide technical assistance and support to that program.
Okay, and that's complete at this point.
Well, we're into our second year. We'll be in our second year of that trial period at the waterfront.
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and that one specifically doesn't sit inside the general fund budget. So eventually, now when it's just as a pilot program, it's kind of sitting outside as a special revenue fund. And it'll, if it sort of grows up into being like an actual town program, it'll look a little bit more like, I would say, wastewater or the Snow Bowl, one of those sorts of funds that, doesn't have a taxpayer burden on it. And really what you're all looking at and really digging into are all the, the services that do have a taxpayer impact. And you look at the other major special revenue funds as well, like Snow Bowl and wastewater and Opera House now.
So do we have any other questions or go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question to that and there's more clarification, but it seems like nothing in this budget from an expense standpoint is going towards the Snow Bowl. As we're looking at this, you mentioned Snow Bowl as a project, but as we're looking at this budget, none of this there's nothing allocated here towards the snow. That's a totally separate.
Totally separate thing. Yep.
For climate change and sea level resiliency, clearly, here. And so I'm curious, when you think about strategic planning, how do you define success? Is that hiring or where is that in the budget here? And is that hiring an environmental consultant to actually look deeply at our harbor and our stormwater? Or is that just kind of Dave and volunteers and I going out and snapping a photo of our stormwater drains? I mean, how do we actually?
No, I think both of these things for stormwater and like resiliency work. I mean, we need significant funding to pull some of this off, and we need significant engineering work to pull that off. So as far as the public landing and say the yacht club or Steamboat Landing, and even Harbor Park, I'm in the process working towards applying for a grant to get funding to do engineering work.
Would you
because-
do a consultant prior to doing work though, wouldn't it? I would love to see a line item in here that is a professional service hiring an environmental consultant to help us better understand how we can appropriately work with Mother Nature, not against it. And I don't feel like our town has committed that level of resource. And I think it goes into a lot of other topics that I know you're very familiar with. But, the way I see is that if we can spend 20 grand on doing an environmental consultant work, I think that takes us to a really good position for when you do start to think about what type of engineering changes might we apply to the Harbor Park or the Yacht Club or.
Well, I guess I would say, that storm in December was very significant. I mean, we've seen other storms like that. We had some damage on town property, no question. And, the public landing is a significant economic driver for the town. And we can't forget that. And we need to make sure that it's operational, like in a month, right? And, the select board did allocate some funds to do some repairs that are desperately needed there. But big picture, the landing needs to be more resilient. There's significant dollars out there right now, through the bipartisan infrastructure bill and everything else that's out there. There's a lot of funding that's going to these types of projects. But that funding, it needs to be, for the most part, shovel-ready work. So we can't spend years, and this is my opinion, years trying to, come up with a master plan for the harbor or for the public landing, and then try to get the funding later down the road. I think certainly these things can happen at the same time, but I think the primary focus right now is how we, and don't, when we're going to be looking at, when we're looking at getting, when we're
From
looking,
an academic standpoint, I'm pursuing a master's in environmental management from Duke University. I mean, there's no academic benefit to applying to a grant that forces a shovel in your hand prior to doing a holistic, comprehensive study on our town.
well, we've had lots of,
It makes no sense to go into a federal agreement for a breakwater prior to doing an independent study on our town.
yeah, and I get that.
The budget for, and I would love to see in our budget and, money for that so that we can actually, comprehensively make, and I don't think it takes multiple years. It's going to probably be a year commitment to make that. I think is quite frankly, it's surprising to me that we don't have that.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask, this is something I chatted with Sarah about in relation to something else, but the select board they're your boss, essentially, Audra and staff. And they kind of set the agenda and they tell you what they want you to do. And you prepare the budget with your managers to present to us. So we're almost like a year behind. in a sense, in what's going to be happening, but is
7 months.
right. So, right. Yes. Yeah. We're like halfway through the things. Right. So is there, there may be a point for us as a committee to make to the select board to say, we would like to add in a line item
Well,
for.
that's why I think this
so
whole meeting is about, right?
Ex-
Like I came in after seeing this and then seeing kind of the commitments is I would make a motion, and I'm not making a motion now, but just hypothetically, to increase this budget to include a allocation allowance, if you will, for us to hire an environmental consultant, or I don't want to label the profession yet, but hire someone that's going to help us understand a broader view, that has academic research, that is an expert in the space. And Jeremy, you're pulled in so many different directions that to have you be looking to make, what grant to look at or what that, I think we need some help here. So that's kind of, I don't know if that makes sense. And
Yeah, no, I think, that's, like you said, that's why we're here
Yeah.
too. And I think it
I
goes
know that
both
has to go to the select board
directions.
too, but-
And then, if you were to make a motion, it's something we would put on the table if people got a second,
make
and
a
where it
couple
would
of-
live.
Would that be-
Suggestions of
Where
where it could live.
Very
Yes.
nice.
I could
Yeah.
also sort of, clarify some of the things that Jeremy's talking about that might be helpful. So, there's a couple of places, you don't have to create a new line item. There's a couple of places that if everybody, if everyone's sentiment is the same as Will's and it's really strong to do something like this, you could go back to the legal or professional services budget and put more money into that line for engineering and other professional services. And we could use those funds to do that sort of work.
Which is 20 grand today.
It's 20 grand
Which is-
today.
which is
So-
low. And that was the same discussion that we spoke about with our
Mhm.
council, right?
Yes, so that's certainly an option. Another option could be, everybody recognizes this is sort of, an important one-off effort. So we find an appropriate capital reserve, or if you all say, nope, this is urgent, we want you doing this next year, we're going to make a very strong case to the select board that this is a huge priority and we want you to do it right away. We could put it in the capital improvement plan area, because that's sort of for the things that we're going to commit to, or not sort, it's for the things that we're trying to commit to
Going
that
forward.
particular financial year. So you could put a line in there for that. But I think what Jeremy is trying to say is there's a lot of good funding opportunities out there for this sort of planning that you're talking about.
We can do just the planning and not be forced into doing, a particular
Right,
project and spending the money in a certain way as the grant.
right. And
allows you to.
that's what Jeremy's trying to say. There's good money
Yeah.
for resiliency planning.
If we can find that, that'd be great. But I also know some of these things do take time to file for the grant. And I get the consensus that I would ask our citizens, like, are you comfortable having this something that we contribute to, so that we can start to really build this and act on something? Because it's no longer just a theory. I mean, our sea level's rising, our ocean's more energetic because it's absorbing heat because we're having warmer temperature. I mean, it's very simple science, and it's here. So
And we have vertical walls along most of our harbor, right?
Yeah,
And
especially
it's
our
significant,
harbor. I mean, we
it's
have
significant
to-
infrastructure.
it's already engineered. So we do have to, there's parts of our harbor that we do have to really, I actually see in our budget forward looking 5-10 years, like we're going to have to allocate for budget to maintain a lot of these and repair a lot of this stuff.
Well, and so what the plan was, Will, just so you know, and this is in the short term, because the governor's climate resiliency program that's out there, that we're a partnership, that we're a member of, their funding is their grant program was supposed to be open in March. It's been going through the legislative budget process. They're intending for that to be open in April and close in April.
Oh, wow.
So my plan has always been that we would be applying for roughly $70,000 to $120,000 to assist us on the engineering side. And this is, when I say the engineering side, it's not just to come up with a plan, right? It's to come up with the right plan, understanding.
To look at it
holistically. That's the,
One.
correct. That's the intent of what I would be applying for. So
So
hopefully we can get that, and hopefully we may not even need, right? I mean, I think it might be appropriate, but it's not going to show up in there. Those grants that we apply for
You
don't
guys,
show
I
up.
just want to also give Karen a chance to ask her question.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to ask anything. I was just going to make a declarative statement. First of all, I agree with you on the idea of having a consultant do a study plan. Secondly, if we are going to do set aside money in the budget for it, I'd like it not to be thrown into a general pile anywhere in there. I would like to see it very specifically say $20,000 or whatever a dollar amount for a consultant to do this. I don't want it in the
Right.
general pot of any part of the budget.
Are those grants that you're talking about matching grants often? Like, do we need to kind of cough up some in order to?
Yeah, the match
qualify,
requirement
or-
under the Climate Resiliency Partnership is, it depends on which funding area that you're looking for. In this one, there's not a lot of match needed, I will say. But this idea, like the 20,000, I appreciate that. But when I've talked to engineers about looking at the public landing, steamboat landing, the yacht club,
Yeah.
that's why my number is up to 120,000, because they think looking at all of the town infrastructure, it's going to cost $120,000 to come up with a plan rather, and I appreciate the 20, but
Well, it's great to know that, and it's, I mean, do you think it may, I mean, we're talking about a budget, so it's not like we're spending this money today. Do you think it makes sense for us to allocate, maybe not 20, maybe not 50, maybe it's 100K to, should we not get this grant? And we just have that as an allowance, as an allocation, which we may, what do you think of that? Does that make?
Sure. I mean, I think that makes sense. I think the consensus appears to be that that's what we need to do in town long term.
So many of our ordinance, so many things around. Okay, I'll make a motion.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, sorry.
Why, no, it's okay. What would be, and I could have just lost this in translation, but you're saying not get a grant and just. Sorry.
Yeah.
And just have it be specifically as a line item and we are putting this money, allocating that money towards it. But why did you say specifically not do a grant? Because I would think
Well,
like that would be.
I feel like we
turning
should
away.
totally apply.
If we don't get the grant,
Yeah, like
Oh, you're
let's
saying if like we
pursue.
apply for it and we
Yeah.
don't get it, then we should, yeah.
Yeah, just to
to
know
have
that
like a
like,
safety net
oh
kind of thing.
shoot, why didn't we 2 weeks ago or, or a month ago,
I
think
thought you were saying
about.
don't do it at all. I'm like, why would we not do that?
I don't know if that's the right way for us to think about our budget. Maybe it's too conservative to think about our budget, but.
Well, just to kind of put this out there. So when we get to the point where we're talking about capital reserves, capital improvements, I proposed 120,000 in the public landing capital reserve with the hope that that money could be used for this purpose should we need it. So.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we talked
why do we have this conversation?
I just want to caution on that. I want to, don't celebrate me too much just yet.
I have the proposal I have, because again, I think this is also the product of, there's different pieces in different budgets and different areas that they can live. So what I would like to propose, so we can look at this, and then also that we don't conclude this budget session without having one more overall review of where throughout the budgets are their dollars and cents for these types of environmental projects. And then we have a chance to kind of do, so that you can present and of like, where are those pieces? And do we feel like that's adequate? Do we feel like it's not adequate? And Peter's raising his hand online, so I just want to recognize. But you're on mute still.
Yeah. I am kind of interested to see this kind of move along, and you're making a great effort to do that, but I want to make 5 points because Jeremy brought the ideas, the realities of that particular department. I would like to remind the public and the board and everybody listening that the select board did go out and seek bids for Sagamore Farms, and they handled it poorly. They never contacted the group that put in a very good proposal, and frankly, it was just the most horrible customer relations effort for a piece of property development. So I want to remind people that we're not good at this yet. Number two, Jeremy, you did say long-term planning in relation to the term of the name of the Snow Bowl. So this is an area that is very, very important. Not that your work in helping Beth out of the Ragged Mountain area is it's essential. But when I hear the term long-term planning, it's something that me as the public, the select board has definitely been putting off for 5 years anyway. And we don't see anything, we haven't heard anything concrete on long-term planning for the Snow Bowl. Next, I've brought up for the last 3 years, a clear cutting ordinance for the town of Camden is absolutely essential to do all these nice, environmental carbon sequestration things and erosion control, but we do not have a clear cutting ordinance. And if somebody buys a piece of property and they want to clear cut 75 acres, they can do it, no big deal. They don't have to register for a darn thing. And that has been sitting around and kicked around, and we don't have time to write an ordinance about that. But so that's now 3 years I've heard that. And Jeremy, I would highly recommend that you somehow get an intern in your office from a local, an incredibly successful environmental college called Unity College, just happens to be out the way. And I think you would find yourself maybe 1 or 2 interns would totally lock into your incredible workload and the wide variety of projects. That's it. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Peter.
That's a
Yeah.
great idea.
For the intern, it seemed like that's a budget impact. So is that something that,
Hmm.
do you have any, I mean, is that something you would like to?
I believe I have some money in there currently that can fund that. And Audra and I have been talking about this recently, and I think we have a plan moving forward to have a Bowdoin, no longer a Bowdoin College student, but a UNC.
And honestly, we can
student.
get Bowdoin College students whenever we want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a plan to try to bring someone on to help, especially on the climate change and adaptation side this year. Currently.
And just to finish what we were talking before, does it make sense not to make a motion for the, or so we're going to continue to?
My recommendation, because again, in hearing there's bits and pieces, is that I as a budget committee, I would be making a request for Audra and the office to pull a subset of numbers that we can look at, that where there's environmental impacts that are already pledged or already baked into this, so that we can say
See that.
across the board without us trying to pick and choose and say, oh, it's there or not, because if that would be a more cohesive way for us to say, do we believe it's covered? And if we voted on a budget and we feel like it's insufficient, we can always make a motion to go back and change it. So I'd rather do that and say we're going to do, not have an opportunity to look at it across the board.
And that wouldn't be in our budget, in planning and development budget anyway.
Okay.
So I
It
think
would be neat, whatever budgets it in, to Karen's point, to explicitly call it out, just so that for transparency purposes, when you do look at our budget, you can see our strategy is, hey, we're spending money on
Maybe next year it gets its own code
sub
in
things.
the budget.
Just so,
Yeah.
just for, because I think it's important for citizens to realize that we are actively working on that, and so that they can see.
and ongoing maintenance and upkeep of it all. I mean, it falls on Parks and Rec does some of it, Public Works does some of it, the harbor, the harbor master's office does some of it.
We could pull to see what our whole commitment is through. That's interesting. And then this is going to totally, kind of at the risk of disclosing my rookie nature, I had somewhat of a process question, and it might be for Audra, but it's, so in budget, being on the historic resources, when the people were saying, oh, budget committee, is coming up, and like, there was a kind of like, oh, get our request in. And then, but what I'm seeing here is it's more like through the departments, not, do you as a town want committees to be requesting budgets? It doesn't seem like that's, because the historic resources requested budget, but it seems like if we wanted to print brochures, that would be in a brochure line item, right? That would,
Yeah, I
or
think
would that be?
with committees, it's more equitable and it works better if you have projects that you want to do, to make requests for projects.
Mm.
And we can sort of build that into different areas, because it's just been a bit odd with,
Yeah.
like in the past, there were some committees that had budgets, some that didn't. The way that those funds were spent was strange, and yeah, so
So
I
if we had
think.
a project in historic, would it be best to say, hey, Jeremy would think, because historic particularly falls under.
Or, I mean, you can, any committee that has a project, you can make a request to the department head you work the most
Okay.
with. You can make it through me. It really,
So if we have Chestnut Street walking, tour brochures that we'll likely be requesting to print.
Mhm.
Where would, I guess, just so I make sure when I go back to the members to say, hey, we do have budget, like, would that be in like in this, in like printing, or with being that it's,
so this one's a little bit different. So
Do you guys want to take it
follow up with you
offline? Yeah,
outside.
why don't you guys take it
Yeah.
offline and then.
sorry, that's
we
my
can-
rookie.
No. We're all rookies at heart, so it's fine. Okay, so are there any other questions? I know we are, and this is no small topic and there's a lot more to cover on it, but in terms of the codes and the planning, are there any budget specific items or before we move to vote on it? Anyone online? I think Peter dropped off. Out of protest. Okay, do you want to?
No, he's back.
No, there. Okay,
Make a motion to approve the planning, code enforcement, community development, and assessing budget per the town manager's request, or not request, your budget recommendation. With the, do we want to even say, like, with the caveat that we will continue to pay attention to climate resiliency, or do we just want to leave that?
I think it'll be recorded in the minutes that we're going to go back to it.
So
So I think if
just
you
a
just
simple-
say what the amount is, then
Okay.
yeah.
The amount of $770,750.
Anyone second?
Second.
So we'll do, just as a reminder, because you were not here last week, we'll do a vote in the room first, and then I'll call out by name on Zoom. So all in favor?
Aye.
And then going online, so we have, Ray Anderson,
Okay,
Peter Lindquist,
No.
and Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
Okay. Congratulations, we finished our first one for the night.
What time is it? 8:30?
Motion passes in under an hour. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
And as always, feel free to reach out to me in the office if you have specific questions on any of this stuff.
Okay, so it looks like we're on to insurances. Maybe, is that you, Audra? We can whip through insurances, the town office building, and then we'll roll into the Opera House Auditorium, I think, because that's something we already talked about last week, and hopefully that'll be a quick one as well. So I'll let you tell us where we're looking
So
as you
for-
get organized here.
So for insurances, so if you turn to, where is that? I want to give you the right tab in case you've got the binder with you as well.
Tab 3, and I'm seeing it on page 7.
Yes, page
So it's
7.
after the assessor presentation.
All right, so is everyone there? So for insurances, this is good news, one area where the budget has gone down. So we have 4 types of insurance that this covers. So general liability, so that's our premium for, pretty much anything that would happen with, building, vehicle, it could happen, an issue with, something with infrastructure, or, like somebody falls on a sidewalk or something like that. It covers those types of liabilities. Unemployment insurance, which we pay into for the state and they assess us a premium. Our workers' comp insurance, which is the one that, that sort of has the most variability from year to year, that's gone down from last year because we had losses that have fallen off. And also retiree life insurance is covered under this. So any questions about the different types of insurance or where we're standing this year?
I'm just generally curious, who's our carrier?
Good question. So we get our insurance through the Allen Agency as our broker. So they bid out every year. So our general liability insurance changes from year to year. I believe right now we're with Trident, Janice. Yeah, Trident's our carrier. It was Liberty Mutual a few years ago because, they do a bid. So it changes from year to
Yeah,
year.
the whole, they do the workers' comp, because that's workers' comp.
Oh, sorry. Workers' comp is very different. So
Okay.
anybody who was here last year knows that we're very different than other municipalities in Maine. Most municipalities go through the Maine Municipal Association to get their workers' comp insurance. We were told that they would no longer cover us a few years back. This was in 2016, right before I got here. And it all came down to the fact that we insure our employees at the Snow Bowl. And, the Snow Bowl is, there's accidents that happen there, and it just makes us a bit riskier than other municipalities in that regard. And we had quite a streak of losses at one point in time. And so MMA said, we are no longer going to cover you for workers' comp insurance. And our premium was over double what it is now. And so we went to our friends at the Allen Agency, and they found a loophole in the law where MEMIC they're required by law to cover us. And so we're with MEMIC, and that's a really great relationship. It's worked out very well for us. Yeah. But we're very different in that regard. Most municipalities don't do that.
So that'll be in a different area, or it's broken out by department, the workers' comp?
No, they have to lump us all together.
Okay, so that's somewhere else.
No, workers comp is here. So that's the $135,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, not at all. But I think
Okay.
Janice printed out sheets that show revenues as well. And so we do have we have a dividend payout. So that's on the revenue side of things for insurance. And that's workers' comp insurance dividend payout.
Any other
Any
questions?
guesses?
It's just so simple.
Go ahead.
Can I make a motion to
Yes.
approve the budget with the insurance as the town manager's recommendation?
Do we have a second? We have Margaret seconding, we'll just say, just for ease of that.
So as per usual, from 3 minutes ago, we will do in-room voting first. So all in favor? Going to online, Ray Anderson,
Yes, okay.
Peter Lindquist,
Yes.
and Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, vote is unanimous. Andreessen. Ray, I apologize. I will now pronounce your name. As a Scrivenich, I will pronounce your name. Thank you.
Not the first one.
Okay, looks like town office building. So that'll be tab 3. And it's actually right on the next page, page 8 in the binder.
And I believe Dave Morrison sort of ran through this as part of his presentation, and Dave's popped up again to answer any questions. Dave, did you present on this one, or was this?
He didn't really
Cut
do the office building. I think he really talked about the auditorium, and then we sort of got a little bit confused about what was what, and then
So yeah,
I think we just left it.
Dave just talk about the significant changes from last year
okay,
to
great.
this year.
Hi there, so this is 0106, correct?
Yes.
Okay. This one is pretty straightforward. It's mostly kind of nuts and bolts expenses of wages and benefits and supplies and utilities. A number of things in this budget are shared with the Opera House because we share a building, so HVAC maintenance or the alarm system and so forth. So the main change for this year is we have had a full-time custodian for quite a while. And we are working towards moving away from that and going to having a cleaning contractor, which actually we think will be more beneficial to us.
So does anyone have any questions for Dave? Looks like it's a negative 8.1% decrease in the budget. So I'll be looking around if anyone has questions, and if not, a motion. If anyone wants.
That's a weird question.
Yeah.
How old is the heating system in that building?
So the
Well, the burner and boiler are fairly new. And that's the main piece of equipment. Also, most of the controls, thermostats and so forth are fairly new. The old stuff is things like pipes and radiators, because we have steam heat, which has its pluses and minuses, but it serves us well. So the system is relatively new. I want to say we put the boiler in 6 years ago. Certainly no more than that.
I'm just curious because I know like the town's trying to be as carbon neutral, at least for the municipality buildings, as possible. But have we ever looked into in older buildings like this doing like instant hot water heaters to heat the buildings or anything, and what that looks like?
So no, it's a good timing because we were just today talking about the air conditioning system really needs to be replaced. And so we were talking about looking at options for heat pumps and having that be sort of the primary heating system for this building. And then the steam heat would just be backup.
So I just know from being over in the building over there, when it gets really cold, as it does, the heat pumps don't produce any heat. I don't know if anybody has them in their houses or not, and if they've noticed that, but it was really hard with two in that small space to keep it warm. And granted, the doors were always opening and closing, which doesn't happen much here, but for air conditioning, I think it would be great. For heat, I'm not sure in such a big space, but I just, with oil and all that stuff just going higher and higher, I just wasn't sure if we've done an estimate or who our provider is for that, to see how much it would cost to change it over.
I mean, we did when we did the big Siemens project a couple of years ago, they looked at energy efficiency improvements throughout all of the buildings, and we did a lot of that with all of the buildings. Right. We put in heat pumps. A lot of times what you see is radiant floor heating with the heat pump. So, the radiant floor heating complements the heat pump. And in here, it would never be the primary source of heat. It would just be a backup, like Audra was saying. And then you don't really need the boiler, but you'll ultimately need the boiler for the Opera House and the rest of the building. And we really don't really heat all of the building. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we heat it to keep it from freezing, but we don't heat it to a higher level. Dave kind of keeps a pretty good eye on that. We'll be looking at that a little bit more, and probably this year coming up. But one of the plans, like Audra said, was to slowly start replacing the older HVAC system or coolant that we use for the Opera House and for this lower level with heat pumps, because they're aging out.
I just looked at the capital reserves for the Opera House, and it looks like you have 50,000. Is that kind of what you're thinking for heating, cooling?
Not necessarily heating or cooling. That's, that we had to, I forget what it was. Dave might need to remind me why we had to sort of draw down some of those reserves. But that's just to sort of build them back up again.
Okay.
Peter, did you have a question online?
I just would like to have Dave take this opportunity to kind of give us a longer term, look at what kind of events, what kinds of pop tech can you see coming down the road 2 years from now, 1 year from now? What are your dreams or a vision for this revenue generating opportunity? Because we do have so many new demographic studies, that show that people are arriving, people are spending more and more time here. So it is your opportunity to really get us back on hitting some home runs and getting people in the Opera House. Tell us what you got planned for.
Well, first of all, for anyone who doesn't know, PopTech was a sort of technology conference that was a wonderful big event every October. And it sort of ran out of gas and downsized and exists in a different form. The good news is Camden International Film Festival has taken over for them, and they bring a lot of folks into town. They did a study, and the amount of money they generate in hotels and restaurants and everything is really pretty substantial. So they've become a big event, and now they've added a second thing, which is the Cabin Fever sort of mini film festival. We still have Camden Conference, which is sort of world renowned and getting back up to speed. So we're pretty good for conferences, and then it's just we bring folks here with a variety of shows that appeal to different folks for the same thing. They come in, they eat, they stay overnight, they shop. So there's really not a lot of holes in our schedule right now. I mean, we always have an eye out for that sort of thing, but there's fewer and fewer of them because it's gone sort of the TED route where many of these conferences are virtual or online. But we right now our calendar is full for 2023, so we're doing okay as far as bringing folks to the downtown. But thank you for asking.
Any other questions before we move to, or ask for a motion for?
So it looks like we'll have the town office building is one separate budget, and then the town office, the Opera House auditorium is a separate budget, just so everyone's clear on that. So Peter, that's great, because Peter wasn't here last week. We talked about the auditorium a bit more, 107. So does anyone have any questions on the office building portion? Okay. Does anyone like to make a motion to accept the
Yes, question?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at here on the production expense year to date, which is up about 4 times the previous year. 73. What's the story there?
So it looks like Ray is looking on the auditorium budget. So he's looking under Opera House revenues, I think.
Should we just sort out the downstairs first?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's stay on 106, which is page 8. Looks like a negative 8.1% decrease from last year, if anyone is.
Are we ready to let me do it? Okay. So I'll make a motion to, what do you say?
Accept, maybe.
Accept, thank you, that's the word, and thank word. $91,950.
Does anyone second that?
Second.
Okay, we'll give it to Will. I saw his hand go like this really quickly. I'll let Sarah do the vote count because she has a better view of the
Yeah.
TV.
So in person, all in favor? Okay, going online, Ray Andreessen.
Yes.
Okay. Peter Lindquist
Yes.
and Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So maybe then, that's wonderful. And then we'll move to the Opera House Auditorium. Were there any other questions for Dave or for Audra?
So I guess just to
I
give.
don't think I answered Ray's question.
No.
Oh.
So I'll-
right.
I'll-
And as I remember, you said why the difference in the production expense?
Yes, yes.
There may be two answers. I'll give the first one. More productions. We're starting to build back after being dark for a couple of years. So we're just doing more shows. But also it may be shown differently this year, and that might be an Audra or Jody answer.
Yes, so this got confusing last week, and I think hopefully having all of it in sort of one area might help a little bit. So we did a change to the chart of accounts this year. So for those of you who were here last year, you might remember that the Opera House auditorium budget sat in the general government category of the budget. So what we've done this year is we've pulled the Opera House auditorium out to be a special revenue fund. So that's very similar to, for example, the Snow Bowl or the wastewater treatment plant. And so that gave us the opportunity to show more of the information on, productions and the revenue expenses associated with productions. And so I believe that would account for that. Is that correct, Jody? Or is there anything else to that?
No, this is just spelling out the actual of what the Opera House production line itself as of this year and up until this year was its own special revenue account. Picture it being its own checkbook, money in, money out. So these were just the basic numbers to give history of the production line.
Yeah, so now with this all kind of pulled out into its own area, instead of, the revenue and expenses associated with the productions just kind of sitting in as a back office function, this allows us to have, it built into a budget that can be shown publicly and everybody can understand. And I think a lot of that came out of, confusion around how the Opera House functioned and where everything sat. So, the idea behind this is that you get to see everything that the Opera House does, all the money that comes in and all the money that goes out and what it's spent on. And so that's why we're kind of representing it a little bit differently. And so the way that we're also showing the tax impact is that anything that, isn't sort of covered by these revenue sources will be an assessment to the town, much like what, the public library does. Does that make sense to everyone?
So in essence, the Opera House hypothetically could float itself, but we have an assessment to the town should it need to cover a base.
Well, no, the town's always subsidized.
It's
the
always,
Opera
so it's
House,
never
yes.
actually, there's never been enough production revenue to fully cover its.
Correct. Yeah, there's revenue from productions, there's revenue from rentals, but it's always been something that the town has supported.
I would just say, and looking at the revenues and kind of echoing a little bit what Peter said, just seems like there is more potential. I looked on the Strands 990s that have been available just to see what they have for, just I think, not that it's apples to apples, but it's pretty, in Rockland, the Strand Theater in Rockland, which is a nonprofit. And they do a significant amount of fundraising. So that's basically takes the place of what a town would, how we're subsidizing it. And they definitely cover more of their expenses than we are currently doing by doing this. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but well, I think their fundraising, their revenue for, their shows and is a lot more. Yes, it covers more of their expenses.
I've always been curious.
I can tell you a little bit about that. It's a hard thing to compare because it's a really different operating system. They are a nonprofit with a membership program, and they just have really different programming than we do. They don't do the rentals we do. They don't do really cheap rentals for local nonprofits like dance schools like we do. It's kind of apples and oranges, so it's a tough comparison to make. They also have I think about 3 times the staff we do.
And then another point, we have a tax increment financing district in the downtown, and part of the development plan very heavily mentions the Opera House. So that's another way of setting off the tax impact of the Opera House that we have as an option to us.
And Ray, you had your hand up online.
Yeah, my question is really for Audra. Since this is gonna be a big change separating the Opera House out this way and having it very much like the Snow Bowl and the Snow Bowl as a separate entity, is there any difference as to how this is going to be organized financially than how the Snow Bowl is? As far as the Snow Bowl, some years will have a profit and sink that into reserve fund for future purchases or whatever. But in the past, there have been years where it fell short and the town had to kick in money to the Snow Bowl budget to cover its costs for a year. Is that going to be the basic system here with the Opera House?
No. So it's as a special revenue fund, it will always be sort of tied to the general fund in some way. And we're sort of going into this knowing that this has been an operation of the town that's always been subsidized to some point. So it'll, there'll be some years where it'll require less subsidy from the town when, there's productions that generate really good revenue, or Dave has particularly good rental income. So there'll be, some years where it's more, if there isn't a good year in terms of that external revenue sources.
Okay.
Any other questions on the floor or online? Would somebody like to make a motion?
Which one is it? Is it the one that was printed out or sent to us in the mail? Is that the one we're doing? Or
So actually, you only have to do the bottom line assessment, because that's really the only thing that, sort of impacts the general fund. So Jody, do you want to?
So would it be the town assessment, the 231?
Yes, that's the number.
this one. Oh, I see where it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'll make a motion to accept 231,000.
Second.
Okay, so we had Karen seconding.
Yep. And then so in-house, all in favor? And then moving to online, Ray Andreessen,
Yes, okay.
Peter Lindquist,
Yes.
and Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
Okay,
Can I ask something before we go forward?
of course.
Yes, I just want to ask, does the budget committee, do we ever ask the town to reduce the budget, like by 4% or something? Because I'm retired and I'm getting killed right now by taxes, and I love Camden, but I'm thinking I wanted to be on the budget committee to see if we also could become more fiscally responsible. And it seems like we just approve everything that you request. Does the budget committee ever say, can you reduce all programs across the board, by 4%, or something to make it seem like there is some awareness of how do you cut costs?
So-
Because that's always important, because I used to manage programs, et cetera. So I'm just putting it out there to ask for feedback.
I think that's a great question. And I see Karen nodding over here, and Karen has served on the budget committee in the past,
11 years.
11 years. So I would love to hear her historical
Yes.
knowledge about this.
In the past, there has been times when the budget committee voted specific line items out or reducing specific line items. But keep in mind, we're only half of or a third of the vote. It's us, then the select board, and then the entire town. So all of that can just turn on a dime. But yes, we can vote out specific line items or reduce specific line items. That's why we're here.
And Mary
Or
Beth,
increase them.
and that was a question that I've had in the past, and I think even last week when we were talking about it, one question I don't have the history of it, but because this is my third year on the budget committee, of the recommendations that we've put in front of the select board, do you have a sense, Audra, of how many of those hold and then get put in front of the, up for public vote, or how much of it gets, shifted by the select board? And I know it's not fair, like, it doesn't be the exact answer, but I didn't have a sense of how much of our changes and recommendations in the past have held through to vote.
I would say they take them all very seriously. Sometimes they'll look at doing other things to, reduce the tax burden. Like it could be, using more of the unassigned fund balance, or, shifting something to another area. So, it really depends, or it could be a specific program that they get feedback on. So they take it all very seriously, but what exactly is done with it can change from what exactly the budget committee, says they want to do, to what the select board ends up doing with that particular recommendation. So it's kind of hard to give you the exact number, but they do talk about every single change that the budget committee made. They talk about the discussion that was around it, and try to figure out how to integrate that into their review process as well.
Yeah, and again, it's for my own clarity, and I guess even just to build on Mary Beth's question too, is, so without it being, line by line, do you find that, most of the recommendations that the budget committee opts to change from what's presented gets reorganized somehow, or are any of them like adopted as voted on?
A lot of them are adopted as voted on.
I was very impressed last meeting that there were a number of select board members on listening to our conversation, just so I think that when they speak, they're understanding not just what the vote was, but what the dialogue.
Yeah. And just to put it up, the only reason that they're not here watching tonight is because the school districts were having their budget review as well. So, otherwise I'm sure that they would all be here.
But they're going to watch it afterwards.
I'm sure. And Mary Beth, I'm just saying, if you stay with us for the next 3 sessions, you could put forward a vote to make a change that we can raise as a budget committee. Just saying.
I could stay.
You could.
Everything just gets passed.
You could
So,
get.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be sarcastic. It's like, whoa. I don't know. I'm just disheartened because I know we're a wealthy town. We have an excess in our budget. And I'm thinking, so when do we ever say, no, let's just, because it's the right thing to do, not spend so much money? Or when do we, so the taxpayers get a break on their taxes, or that something changes? I don't know. I don't want to be the one kind of negative person speaking here about. It is a concern.
I think about that all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I don't think you're the only one, is what I'm saying. I think it's something that goes through all of our minds, but when you hear also from, this is my 3rd year. It's not like I've been doing this as long as anybody here, but I think about that. And sometimes I think you're right. It's like, well, it's what they're presenting and we should probably do it. And maybe we need to take more time with being like, well, is this really necessary, or can we? But there is a lot of things also that can be switched around and moved around. Specifically, I remember, we were talking about, there was a topic last time about reducing the lawyer expense, and Audra's like, well, I'm just gonna get the 20,000 from this and give it to him. So there's always money that can be moved around in other ways. But I'm all for lowering taxes. I don't think you're the only one. So.
Yeah, and I guess the way to look at it, and this is really your really important value here, is that municipalities are service delivery organizations. That is the bulk of our, that's everything. It's personnel. If you look at wages and benefits, that's half the budget, and then the other half are all the equipment, materials, other things that are needed to deliver those services. So if we're talking, significant cuts that are going to have significant impact on taxes, we need to cut services. So that's what you need to be talking about. What are the services that you don't want any, or you feel like we can live without, or you feel like we have reductions in? those are the important conversations to have, because I think saying, you know, across the board, a certain percentage or whatever, that kind of puts it on us to come back to you with cuts to services. And you're the residents, you're the people that we're delivering those services to. So that's where we really, that's your value and where we need your input. What services do you think should be cut or should be reduced, or whatever the case may be? If you want to reduce.
I don't know if I agree with you, because when I was running a program, if they said to me, Mary Beth, you have to cut your program. It's, you know, the expenses, you have to cut it by X amount, and you decide, because you know that program, how do you reduce, you know, is it in this area? Because, well, it's just tricky. I mean, I think it's both of us working together. You just made it, like, what program should we cut? So I have to think about that. Okay, Parks and Rec, what do I cut there? Do, you know, no lifeguard? I mean, I don't know, it's tricky. I would need help from you folks. Whatever. It's just a complicated situation, so whatever. I'll be quiet now.
Peter, you had a question, and go ahead, Peter.
Peter's trying to say something.
I know, you see his hands up, but you haven't said anything yet.
Well, I think it would help, you know, Mary Beth, it would help everybody to have Barbara remind us, last year, what was our unassigned, you know, unspent fund balance? What was it last year, and what is it currently this year? Of just the amount of money that is carried by the town unspent. What was it last year, and what is it this year?
I can tell you it's 3.6 million this year, and Jody's looking now to tell you what it was last year.
3.6 million. Did everybody hear that?
That's astounding. That's an incredible amount of money.
Thank you.
Well, my understanding is that you want 2 months. This is what we talked about last
Of
time.
operational expenses.
2 months of operational expenses, and I calculated a burn rate of like $1 million a month. So that's 2 million.
Yes.
That's 2 months worth. So we have almost 4 months worth. So
FY21 unassigned was 4.6 million.
4.6.
Yes, the prior financial year.
So, I mean, that capital that was sitting, I mean, in this environment, in this environment, is that such a bad thing? We're earning interest, sitting in a money market, or that funds are sitting
In our checking account.
Okay, could we, I mean, the financial professional me is thinking, well, could we put in like a money, I don't think that's even our.
I think the question coming back to the budget committee is with unspent funds in, you know, at a $4.6 million, you know, valuation, then is that reconciling against what the percentage of increases are in the various budgets, given what run rate we have in those funds and what we're now asking for increases. And so I think that's, you know, I mean, that is the question I'm saying I would be asking.
I'm not suggesting that we do what I'm going to talk about next. But I do know that in the past, oh gosh, I can't even remember how long ago it was, that the town decided not to fund the Snow Bowl for 3 years in a row. It went into the red, deeply into the red. And then year number 4, we had so much snow, it started in November and it didn't stop until the end of April. The Snow Bowl climbed their way back out of their deficit all by themselves. During that same time frame, we were going to buy a new fire truck. It was suggested that we find a used one instead of brand new. So there were a lot of these little things that were looked at, but I think all in all, we're in pretty good shape. When you look at what the taxes are in some of our surrounding neighbors, we're looking pretty good. Thank you, Audra.
And I would say, you know, last year, I think it was, we used 850,000 of our unassigned fund balance to set off taxes because, like everybody's making the point, we have a lot of money that it doesn't need to be sitting there. It should go back to the taxpayers to reduce the tax burden. And we're able to do that again this year to reduce the tax burden. And so that's sort of built in. I think there's 650 use of fund balance proposed this year. So yeah, we can certainly use that money, given that it is so healthy, to offset the tax impact.
Is that so in a statement like that, does that mean like it will be like reviewed and discussed, or is there like an ordinance or things that say when we hit this amount, we will be applying? Is there something to drive that decision making, or is that?
You guys get to vote on it. When you vote on the revenues, you vote
Okay.
on also the use
Okay.
of fund of the unassigned
Okay.
fund balance.
Got
Yeah.
it.
And I think Peter brought it up his first year on the budget committee. He said, well, you've got so much, why don't we use, like, be more aggressive in the use of it? And the budget committee voted to do so. So that's all things to consider as we go through each part of the budget.
Did the select board agree with that?
They did. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So these are all good things. Where are we? Well, I see the word streetlights
Well,
next.
so we finished.
We did the Opera House
Yeah,
Auditorium.
we did. You
Yep.
did. Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to keep checks on here. Streetlights, but I don't know if that's its own separate thing, and it doesn't have a tab listed. So if you could direct us where we need to look.
So next up is going to be the public works budget, because all of the next few items are smaller budgets that sort of flow out of what Dave is responsible for. So I'll bring up.
Okay, so it's a little out of order.
And then just to keep myself honest, so we're at 8:03. So we got 8:03, and so we will have a good solid, full half hour
Of public works.
public works. And then
Just a moment. I'm going to screen share with the folks who are joining us online.
So it's tab 5, and it'll be right the first one behind the marker. It's page 17. And then
Has there ever been, just to kind of go back to the Opera House, has there ever been a discussion that you know of with
Dave, that where where it can maybe be a different model, where it's not so much dependent on the town, where it's more of like, how can we get more revenue in here, either by shows or whatever?
Yes. Yeah.
That's in discussion. I didn't want
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if it was like a personal thing, so I didn't want to bring it up necessarily while he was talking, but I didn't know if it was something
Well,
that.
one of the sort of drives behind kind of changing how it's represented in the budget sort of demystifies so how much do we spend on productions and how much do they bring in? And, it just makes it more obvious how it happens. But I guess, and Dave could go into this a little bit more. So, all the theaters and all the sort of performance venues throughout the state of Maine, there's some, regardless of what the model is, there's some level of like either fundraising that needs to be done, or, some of them are publicly supported through taxes. And, that's kind of a decision that Camden made a long time, is that we're a, tourist-based economy, and the town wanted to invest in, the Opera House and the Snow Bowl to keep that tourist-based economy sort of going throughout the year. And I do think that offsetting some of those expenses with TIF funds, so it doesn't have that impact on taxpayers, is probably going to be what we're looking at going forward. Because I think that, no matter how well Dave does in trying to, make productions as sort of like lucrative as possible and get more rental venues in, like he's packed out for 2023. And even then he's not going to make enough revenue to completely cover the expenses there. So it's a tricky thing.
and if Dave dropped off, just tell him thank you for us, because we can't see the screen anymore, because I know we just
Hi, I'm Dave St. Laurent. I'm in charge of the Public Works Department. The Public Works Department in this budget consists of the Public Works Department, streets, highways, bridges and sidewalks, parking lots, the tree program and dams. We have a staff of 10 people. And we pretty much take care of the infrastructure in the town. It's a big budget. We spend pretty much all of it, and we could always spend more because there's always more to do. But we're kind of limited by the amount of people we have and the time. The construction season is short. So I'll go through this. I always look at every budget. This is probably my 16th municipal budget, and I've been with the town for 3.5 years. So I come from private industry, and I've always looked at these with the mindset of, how can I make it more efficient? How can I reduce costs? But these are some of the toughest budgets I've been in to do that because of everything that's just recently happened. We've had a lot of changes in the world, and a lot of the things that I do are tied into those changes, and they cost more money. And that's pretty much going to be the story of my budget as I go through. But I do always look at it from the perspective of that, I'm paying for this myself. And I always look at it on how can I save the residents money. I really enjoy working for the town. I enjoy working with all the people that are here. And I'm part of the community. And I'm going to carry on at this point. So we pretty much take care of the snow, on the roads and sidewalks. We take care of all the trash that's in the trash cans around town. We take care of the road sidewalk maintenance, the shouldering, the ditching, the paving, the sweeping, and the brush removal. We take care of the stormwater system that takes care of the water that takes it away from all your property. There's over 718 catch basins. We have a garage, and we take care of all of the fleet in the town. We take care of all the inspections and most of the minor repairs for the entire town. We assist the other departments with the harbor, like removing the floats and putting the floats in, the Parks and Rec department putting the seasonal floats out in the lakes. We take care of a lot of the miscellaneous odds and ends in the Opera House and any other, little things that are, would fall into that category. We're in charge of the townwide infrastructure, project management, traffic signals, and streetlights. I take care of the dam maintenance, inspections, water level recording, and emergency planning for 4 town-owned dams. We take care of the oversight of all the trees in the right-of-way, including the shade tree planting and watering. We take care of pruning of the hazardous trees and cutting of those down. We take care of the parking lot maintenance, and all this town street signage, along with the road painting. And this fiscal year, we had no reportable injuries, which is an important aspect to look at when you think about 10 people doing all these things. So we take care of approximately 60 centerline miles of road. That's 148 roads, 38 miles that are town-owned, and 12 of those roads are state-owned, and which equals 20 miles. The department is also responsible for 13 and a half miles of sidewalk, which we recently just added a mile to last year. Last year, I kind of go over what we had done last year, just to kind of give you kind of a look at what you spent your money on. So last year, we had a lower level paving year, but we had a high level of sidewalk infrastructure improvements. But the road repair that we did was long, and it was costly because of the increased costs in liquid asphalt. We did Bayview Street from Chestnut to Beacon, Harrison. We did the final course of pavement. We did Cobb Road to 105. And then we did Park Street at the beginning of the section of Elm. Sidewalks, we rebuilt the Knowlton Street sidewalk on the corner. We did the sidewalk from Washington, from Knowlton to Gould Street. You can see in this picture, we installed our own granite curb in. This isn't something we've ever done before. We did this, we've hired some really good people that can do these things. They're really skilled. This is something, if we had to pay this to be done, we wouldn't have been able to afford it. So we installed all the granite curb ourselves on those roads. You can see in this picture here, this is in front of the Opera House and across the street in front of Eric's Barbershop. We removed all of the old granite. And we replaced all the old granite. If you saw this before, it was all crooked. The sidewalk was all bumpy. This was all taken care of internally. This is the Route 1 sidewalk in the Matthew John, the Shirttail Point sidewalk that was been working on for, I don't know, almost 12 years, I guess. So this was executed and you know, I can't say that we did all of this. There was contractors that did this, but it was a combined effort with the DOT contractors and some of our oversight. And so we have a new sidewalk basically that goes from Quarry Hill all the way to the Loyal Biscuit, and we go from Matthew John all the way to Shirttail, which is pretty amazing. And the Shirttail sidewalk will be paved in the spring. We just ran out of time. This is one of the things I'm pretty proud of. Every year I've made an attempt to improve our GIS system and what we record for infrastructure improvements. Prior years, we've done all of the stormwater collection system on the GIS system. And we also did our paving, our plowing routes. This year, we basically took Bart Wood's old GIS, all Bart Wood's historic shade tree inventory, and we had it all loaded into the GIS system. And then we also created another component of it where we had volunteers that went out to, and a lot of those volunteers are on the Conservation Commission, and they helped me, or the department, identify potential tree locations. And as you can see in this little photo to the right, each one of those check marked boxes is a new tree that we planted. We planted over 50 trees this year. I think we planted almost 60 trees this year. And every time I would look on this tree app, the volunteers would have gone out, talked with the residents, and then make notes. I would look at the app, it would say, yes, the resident wants this kind of tree, they're willing to do this. So I could just simply look at it, tell the staff, hey, like, go to this location and plant this tree. So the little green halos means that the Conservation Commission people, volunteers, had looked these over, and they're all been approved by residents. We also watered these trees three times a week, and I was on the weekend myself watering these things when it was hot. It was a lot of work, but we did it, and it was a goal, and I think it was a big accomplishment.
On town property, or those are the ones, the tree program on people's personal?
These are not the tree program. These are all town-owned trees, and you know, a tree is one of the biggest investments you can make. You know, just think 50 to 100 years from now, when you're coming into Camden, these are going to be like, this is going to be a canopy. This is going to be an amazing thing, which we don't have, we're losing. Yeah. It appreciates in value. You know, we spent maybe $15,000 doing this, but this is going to have a huge, it's a huge asset to the town. We had a fuel depot. It was really old. It was 1991. The prior budget, we were concerned that, you know, you can see it was rusted. The legs were rusting off of it. I was going to do an inspection on it. I started doing some research. I found that we were handling, this was being handled by so many people within the town. There was the finance department was dealing with it. The assistant city manager was dealing with it because people would come in, they would fill up with fuel. We would have to bill it out. We'd have to keep track of the fuel. We had the environmental aspect of it. There was EPCA reporting that was associated with it. There was the monitoring of it, the filling of it, and it was old and it needed to be upgraded, and it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was a good idea when they didn't have fuel cards, but they have fuel cards now, and we don't need this kind of system. So we had talked about it, and we made this decision. It was best to probably eliminate this, and so we went through the environmental process of removing this system, and we got rid of the tanks. We got rid of all the pumps. And you can see these photos here. It was all looked at by a specific environmental firm. When we first looked at this, they had given us a huge quote to do it. We did have to work ourselves alongside the environmental company, and we saved a ton of money doing it. We removed these, and then we rebuilt the building. We didn't rebuild the building, but we kind of put the skin on the outside of it. And now we have a storage area, and the tanks are removed, and we get our fuel at Maritime. So It's a huge, it's everybody, yeah, it was a big improvement. We weren't, I can't say that we're responsible for the paid parking, but we helped with the paid parking. I think the paid parking is a really good way. If you're thinking about ways of looking to reduce taxes, you should look at ways of bringing in more revenue. You know, and one of the things about paid parking is you're mandated by law that you need to take that money and use it for public infrastructure. And where it would go is probably my budget. So my budget would go down if I had public infrastructure money coming from paid parking. I'm not saying I'm pushing paid parking, but that's an option. We installed the signs and 2 kiosks in the downtown. We helped with the pilot project in the public at the public landing. So we're getting into the drainage part now. So every year, you know, you can go around town and you see these areas that will be puddling or we'll have stormwater infrastructure because it's old metal pipe and it caves in and then it just doesn't work. This one area right here was on Curtis Avenue and by the dentist's office. Everybody remember the big puddle? You go through the big puddle every time it rained. Well, that's been taken care of. That was one of the things that we had taken care of this year. We had another area on Maple Street that we had taken care of. That was another problem. There's a flowage that runs through the back of Maple Street. That was all redone. We put a new catch basin in, riprap, plunge pool. This is an area on Beaucaire where we had actually an outfall and it was going in between these buildings and it was all caved in and it was basically flooding the area. So we had to actually dig this all out in between those two, that real narrow space, and replace the pipe. This is I'm shifting gears here now. So one of the things that takes a lot of our time and people don't think about is the storm damage that occurs. Every time it rains, we've got these heavy downpours, particularly in the winter when we don't wing back the snow because, you know, we didn't have a chance or because it was slush or whatever. It will channelize right along the edge of the road. And there was these channels along the edge of the road that were this deep and that wide, and there was miles of it. We had to go through and replace all that because what happens is if you don't do that, the road breaks off and then you got to replace the road, which is really expensive. So this takes a lot of our time and we end up doing this in the middle of winter. A lot of people go, why are you always like hurting my grass on the edge of the road? Well, it's because there's a right of way there and there's a reason why there's a right of way there so we can move the snow back so this doesn't happen. So along with the storm damage, you can see the public landing or steamboat landing. This takes a beating every year. And, you know, we go out there and we have some really talented people that can run equipment and you can see what it looked like before. We replaced it and then we actually did a little bit of improvement there. This is the dam part of it. So one of the new things that we take care of recently is all of the dams in town. We have 4 dams. We have the East and West Dam, the Seabright Dam, and the Montgomery Dam. The East and West Dam and the Seabright Dam are all high hazard dams. And a lot of the budget that we're going to be looking at is really for professional inspection of those. And they generate a report. And in 2019, they generated a report that had a lot of suggested improvements in it. And when you're talking a high hazard dam, it's not something you don't want to fix because if the dam failed, you're talking the potential for people to be harmed. So these are things that really you don't want to skimp on. So a lot of the things that are in the budget for the dam part are requirements or recommendations that were a result of the 2019 inspection report done by Kleinschmidt. Other things that we do that just outside of, you know, improvements, we respond to phone calls almost weekly about stormwater and seasonal ponding. We get calls about, you know, brush growing into the road and hedge trimming. We get calls about potholes in the sidewalks, sign defacing and graffiti. We take care of light poles that have been hit and knocked down, and we got to go and replace them, and it happens a lot. We constantly are straightening out sign poles. We have to monitor water level changes and make adjustments to the dam gates. We take care of all the street lights. We take care of, you know, traffic signal repair. We don't have a lot of them, but it's another thing that we take care of. We do a lot of driveway culvert replacement. We do the road opening permits for sewer lines, and I'm on the Conservation Commission liaison also. Some of the miscellaneous jobs that not included what I've already talked about. We did a new crosswalk with granite curb on C Street. On Route 1 at Cedar Crest, there was a Route 1 new sidewalk, which I've already talked about. On Melvin Heights, we did a lot of ditching and erosion control. So what happens is, we want to put sand out so that we provide traction and it's safe to drive in the wintertime. But the downside of that is that all goes in the ditches, and over time it builds up and then it becomes a stormwater problem. So periodically we need to go through and dig all of that out, and that's a constant battle. We're doing that. We're trying to stay on top of that all the time. So we did a lot of ditching last year. Put in a new culvert on LeGrand Drive. Sorry. We put a new driveway culvert on 16 Oak Street, repaired riprap on 18 Rockbrook Drive. We installed new drainage and riprap starting at 4 Penobscot Street and Bayview Street. And we did another one at 11 Blake Street. So some of the other things when we're working on infrastructure, part of what we do is we're always looking for opportunities for grants that are part of MDOT. One of the things that we did a couple of years ago was a heads up for safety for pedestrians. And at the time, there was some opportunity for grants. I applied for one of them. Unbeknownst to us, we ended up getting it 2 years later, and it was $713,000, which is to go towards a sidewalk on John Street. So we're kind of doing the pre-planning part of that, talking about that. We also got a grant for some crosswalk improvements all along Route 1 in the section where there isn't new sidewalk, and also on 105. And then we also have already gotten a pedestrian bridge grant, which I'm working on Rawson Avenue. So we're working on that. We're getting closer to the phases of engineering and public outreach or public presentation, and that should be coming your way shortly.
You say pedestrian bridge, does that mean it's just specific? There's not going to be any regular for motocross anymore, it's just.
Right. So there was a lot of communication with the public with MDOT at one point in time. They came in and explained that, look, we're not putting another bridge in. We're going to terminate the road. It's a dead end. We're not putting another bridge in, but we will help you put a pedestrian bridge in. And that's kind of where we're at. So the choice is a pedestrian bridge, or if we wanted to completely fund a vehicular bridge, we could have done that. Would have been significantly more. And I think the conclusion was we want a pedestrian bridge. These are those crosswalk improvements in the areas I had talked about. Every year, I kind of keep a running tally of where I'm at, and I have stretch goals that I put in for myself. These are my personal things that I put in my own projects, which aren't included in some of the things that I reviewed with you, but they're the things that I've accomplished, and I check them off in yellow, and then I carry over the things in blue, so I keep track of where I'm at. So you can see I kind of have a lot of things that I still have to do. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a lot there. I had to put them all on one page. One of the things that I am asking for is 2 pieces of equipment. We have an aging fleet of vehicles. I know no one wants to hear us wanting to buy new things, but we do. We're the Public Works Department, and we have 2 old pickup trucks. One's a 2010 and one's a 2013. I want to replace one with a rack body truck with a lift gate for safety, because a lot of the sidewalk improvement work that we do, we have a plate whacker. It weighs 80 pounds, or no, actually it weighs 150 pounds. We have a lot of heavy equipment, and we have to lift it with a piece of equipment like a loader or a backhoe, put it in the truck, and then drive the thing over there and then take it out. This would make it a lot easier for things to be put in. It could be then lifted up, rolled into the truck, and then we can go to the job site, and the job site can carry the guys there without having to drive 2 or 3 vehicles, instead of just spraying a pickup. And then the second one would be a pickup truck to replace the 2013. Both of these would be equipped with a plow and a sander on the back, so they could be used in the wintertime. That's pretty much it. And I put together a little list here on the right that kind of goes through the whole budget, all components of it, what it was last year, what it was this year, the increase and why. I can explain all these if you have any questions. These are generally my notes, but I'm gonna be more than happy to go over them with you if there's any questions.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you and your people for doing an excellent job on your snow plowing this year.
Well, thank you.
It's
Thank you.
been really, really well done, even on the sidewalks. Did a
Oh,
great job.
That's great to hear because we put a lot of extra effort into
I
the
know, I
sidewalks.
saw that,
Yeah.
yeah. The second thing, and this is just a suggestion
Mhm.
for down the road, is to take a look at reclaimed tires for repaving streets. It is being done all over the country.
Mhm.
It's expensive at the outset, but the streets last much, much longer because it's, I forgot what kind of rubber they call it, but it helps the road to expand and contract and not split and fall apart. You might want to test drive it on Steamboat Landing.
I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, it's Mars Hill
Mars Hill's done it?
is got it, and they've had it for a while. So I do know that it works in some of the more desperate areas in terms of climate around here.
Mhm. Well, that's good input, and I will definitely look at that.
Yeah, and they last long, long.
I'd love to
long
find a
time.
road that lasts forever.
Oh, yep, absolutely.
In case anybody's raising their hand.
And you can test it on my street, Blake Street.
I guess I have a question, Dave, for you. Aside from the full-time wages and all the things that,
Mhm.
we associated with that, what are some of the biggest things accounting for the 12.3 increase?
So
12.3%?
so we have okay, it's all about fuel and parts right now. So a
And
lot of.
sand and salt,
And
apparently.
sand and salt. So in fiscal year 2022, salt was $52 a ton. Okay. It went up to $72.87 a ton. We use approximately 1,150 tons a year. If you just do the math, we're already at this year at 105,644, and we're not using any more than we ever had before. One of the issues is when we do this budget, because we do it so early in the year, it's after we do the municipal, we do a combined municipal bid with all the other towns, and we're at the mercy of what the bids come in at. And last year they just went off the charts, so that really killed us. And this year, because of the frequency of the small storms and then the later big storms, we've used almost our whole stockpile of sand too. So in prior years, we've always kind of had a little bit left over, and then we just add to it. This year, we've used almost all of it. So we took a big hit this year. I've got my eye on it. It's making me nervous, but I think it's everybody that's in this industry is seeing this. And there's not much I can do other than not plow the road. I can plow it, but I can't treat it, and then it gets icy and it's dangerous. Yeah.
I can't remember if I've asked this before, but have we ever looked into different salting options where it's not actually salt? Like out in Washington, I know they have trucks that have like a big tank on the back, and it's a liquid rather than a salt, and it kind of disperses that way, and it doesn't destroy the cars. Not that that's a huge deal, but I'm just saying, like, I didn't know if you've looked into it and what the cost difference might be.
So sand and ice and snow and ice control is an art, and you can take it to all these different levels. There's pre-treatment where you can take brine, or they have beet juice. There's all kinds of different things that they use, but they're very limited in how effective they are. And ultimately, if they're not used locally, you're talking about trucking these things in, which then adds a lot of cost to it. Pre-wetting, and putting, it's like the last 2 trucks we bought, we put ground sensing controls on it so that when the guys stop or the people stop, the spinner that puts the material down stops. So that's like a little thing that you can do because if you don't do that, the things you'll see every once in a while, like the older trucks will keep on putting salt down. That you start counting that and it adds up. One of the things that you can do is you can pre-treat the road with a brine, but you have to have a brine maker. And that's limited because you have to have a certain amount of, you can only use it when the road will evaporate off the water that you put down that has the salt in it. And then it leaves the salty surface, which you see as a residue. So then when it snows, it doesn't stick to the surface and you can plow it off more easier. You can do that. But to answer your question, there's no real magic solution or material that is locally provided that I think would be effective and cost effective. You know, I mean, we kind of use salt because that's what's locally available. It's not saying we can't look at some things and do some trials. I go to the conferences, I look around all the time, and if there's things that are available, I would definitely use them.
In the spirit of something that was asked earlier, in terms of the vehicles that you're looking for, I know there was requests for electric vehicles. I mean, in terms of, I mean, there's not many used electric vehicles, and that's not the request. Are you looking for used vehicles as options for the fleet, or is that?
You know, you don't ever budget for a used vehicle. It's hard to do. So this budget is for a new vehicle, but I do look
To see
like
if
for a
there's-
used vehicle, and I always look for used equipment. That's what I do first.
Okay.
And if I find something with low mileage that, you know, it
Yeah.
looks like it's a good buy, but you're
It's hit or miss. I
You're
just was
taking a
curious if- yeah.
chance, and you really have to know what you're buying.
Right. Right.
Is that under fleet maintenance or no? Where is that
Vehicle
line
part-
item?
They're under CIP, yeah.
Capital improvement.
That's what I thought. So
program.
we're
Sorry.
not looking at that
No.
tonight, other than knowing about it for when we get to that point.
Exactly.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we're not looking at it and voting on that tonight specifically, but,
No,
okay.
yeah.
Thank
This
you,
is
thank
this
you.
is not a big ticket item, but just drew my attention. I was just curious. Is yours the only budget that has drug testing as a line item?
I think we have to have CDL licenses.
I was gonna say, is it
commercial-
tied
Commercial
to-
driver's
is it tied
license,
to-
so that's a requirement, but now
Curious.
the whole town does drug testing
Yeah.
for
And we
everybody.
have like a pooled program for anyone.
I was
who
just,
operates
it's the
it,
first
but-
time it caught my eye. Again, it's not a big ticket budget item, but I was just curious.
Yeah.
I believe so. We run our program through Health Connections, right? Is it?
Right.
Yeah.
It's part of a federal drug testing program, but we go to Health Connections for the service of the testing.
Yeah, I know that having worked for Mainland Channel Cruises, we were our own consortium. So you're working with
Oh, you
your
mean who are we pooled
population
with?
or the big general
I don't,
population?
I don't handle the drug testing, like personally, it's done by the administrative people in the office. And I think we're part of a group, a
A
pool,
larger
a
pool,
larger pool.
not
yeah.
just Camden. Okay.
Right.
Anything online for questions?
Yes,
Go ahead,
yeah, I'm unmuted. Dave, and I don't know, there's a separate section on the dams and everything, but
Mhm.
if you go into what type of maintenance the different town-owned dams need and what's covered in this budget?
I do a little bit, Ray. You know, this is my first year for handling the dams, right? So I have a working knowledge of the audits and the requirements of the safety requirements of the dams. And that's the main focus of this budget. We don't take care of mowing the area. We don't do those things. I mean, I do shovel out to go to the areas to inspect them daily and look at the water levels. But other than something that's already been presented to me in the Kleinschmidt audit wasn't put into this budget. I only am putting in what was in that audit. And there's a little bit of money in there for miscellaneous things that break or need to be fixed. But there has been no defined maintenance per se ahead of time for the dams until I do the next audit. which is already scheduled, and a lot of the money in there is for that audit. Another part of it is for a diver to go down and check the gate to see what needs to be done. But those are for the high hazard dams. And that's why those are budgeted, because it's a safety issue.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot of concern about the Montgomery Dam too.
I understand.
And the sluice gate there, does that need to be repaired? Is this gonna cover it?
That is not included in that budget, but I've looked at that gate. I've fixed it twice. It's in bad shape, and it probably needs to be completely replaced, in my opinion. It can't. I mean, it's rotting. When you wheel the gate down, it lifts the whole platform up. It has a mechanism on it that's unsafe because it takes two people to operate. I mean, you don't find too many places that have a wheel and a lever, a metal bar where you click it up and another person moves the dog away. That's like, it breaks all the safety rules in the book. Not saying we're not going to do it and take care of it, but it's in need of an upgrade.
Have you costed that out as far as how much it would cost to replace it?
I haven't yet, but I do have a reference from the West Dam that was done several years back with an actual functional operational gate. And I will be providing Audra with that to give to you folks.
So just for a reference, oh, go ahead, Peter. Okay.
The $5,000 that you have there allocated for Montgomery Dam, that's just for, can you tell me what that's for?
Could you tell us where that is?
So the dam budget sits within the leisure services area. So it's like way in the back of the,
That's why.
yeah, it's way in the back, page 30.
So maybe while we're turning to that, this is a good, as our segue for this evening, and before we start, because I know you have in the agenda, it's broken down into streetlight. How is the voting going to proceed in terms of the order of, yeah.
So I'd recommend, since
I'm not pushing to start the voting. I just want to make sure before we start looking and flipping that we're,
yeah, I'd recommend you sort of start with the public works budget, the budget that contains,
on page, yeah.
Right, because the dams isn't, right, the dam is an entirely separate.
That's what I'm saying. So before we start going to like the flip and the flop back and forth.
It's $2,500, Ray, for paying for overtime to adjust the dam during flood conditions and for miscellaneous picking things up and that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, we fixed the dam twice last year. We had to lower it. We had to place new boards on it. We had to put planking down below to kind of access it when the water was there. So it's not a lot of money, but that's what's there.
Okay.
Yep.
And just along with Sarah's question, streetlights, I'm looking at the expenditure summary that's in the front of the book. Streetlights is under public safety. So do you think that should be moved to next week when we're that's everything else is public safety? I think next week.
You can vote on it next
I
week.
don't
but if you
see
have
where
any
it is.
questions, Dave's the one who takes care of streetlights, so.
And that's not under tab 5 that I'm seeing unless I'm missing it.
No, you are right. It does go in the public safety. It sits within the public safety budget.
Okay.
Don't know why, but so you can vote on it next week. But if you have any questions now.
Gotcha.
Do you want to know about streetlights at all?
No, I don't. I don't, but I just want to make sure we know what we're.
Yeah.
This is that time of that. This is the time where, again, we've committed to trying to do better. So in terms of what you've just presented to us, in terms of the budget on page 17, that's the overarching public works department. And that, if we were to look and focus on that tonight, that will still give us time and opportunity to review and vote on the subset of budgets. So do we want to, can we maintain our focus on what you just took us through and
Sure.
on that budget, so we can
Right.
focus on any remaining questions we have there and then see where we are? That,
Comment, and
Yeah.
then somewhat of a question. The comment is, Dave, I think everybody in the town appreciates all of what you do.
I appreciate it.
And
Thanks,
I
Will.
personally have enjoyed spending time with you. You do so much for this town.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
My feeling is that we just need to keep you happy.
Well, I am happy. So,
Well, I hope you are, because I know you
Yeah.
do a lot for this town.
thanks a lot. That means a lot. I do this, I mean, Audra knows this. I don't do this as much for the money. I do it because I like helping out, you know. I
It's
really
amazing
do.
how even seeing the time you spent, but not even seeing how prepared you are even for your presentation, but how you track things. It's incredibly transparent, and I appreciate you putting that much effort into it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
The only question I had, because it's the elevator, like big increases, the sand. And is that something that we can think about? Let's say we don't use it, it's a stockpile for later, right? It's really not a, like, I guess if you see, when you have this winter salt and sand,
Mhm.
because you said we've used so much of it, is that kind of thinking about stockpiling?
So what
up, or-
happens is we budget for salt and sand.
Yeah.
We spend about $20,000 on sand each year. We load the shed up with our annual estimated usage of sand because we can't get that in the wintertime. And then our salt comes in on shipments off a barge and we truck it in as we need it.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it
That's how it
works.
works. So
And we've almost used all our sand.
And
So we don't have,
we can't get sand with the cost of.
well, this new budget, what will happen is if this new budget's approved, I'll order my sand when the bids go out.
Okay.
They'll truck the sand in, we'll pile it up in the building, and then we'll be ready for winter again. And then we'll call in salt as we need it.
and Peter, I saw you had your hand up before.
Yes, try to do this quickly. I think there's a couple of things that the general public and even the budget committee doesn't know about Mr. St. Laurent. That our public works department previously did not have the greatest cross-training and professionalism that we now have. Dave has done an amazing job of hiring people and making sure that they are professionals, but also that they have an opportunity to become a professional in a very demanding and very difficult field. And he does an amazing job of this kind of training they've got great benefits and all this stuff, but it does take a leader that can do that. So that's a plus, and I really appreciate that. And I know that you've heard this, and we benefit as a town. Now, there's a question too, and this is probably more for Audra, is that we have got a situation, again, I don't know if everybody knows this, that Mr. St. Laurent has also got another full-time job running the Midcoast Solid Waste Facility. So I am absolutely mystified how such a demanding job and such a list of things that still are to be done next year is how long can we, put up with a full-time, two full-time jobs with one full-time person. I just don't get it. It was temporary at one point, and now it seems to be not temporary. So, Audra, if you want to take this offline, send me an email. I just don't get it.
Peter, I want to answer you. I have a certain skill set that nobody else around here has. I am one of probably the only people that have managed a quarry landfill, and I did it for almost 13 years. One of the reasons why I can do this is because I don't try and do this myself. I try to get people around me that can help me do these things. And I delegate a lot of the things that I do and the locations that I'm at, and that's how come I can get more done. In terms of the Midcoast Solid Waste, the town of Camden has a very big interest in making sure that that operation is run correctly and efficiently. And I'm not being paid the salary that a person would be paid to be doing that job, as well as the fact that I'm cross-training and setting up an organization over there that can run on its own and doesn't need me there all the time. And it's kind of a transition plan and a focus to get that running in that way so that you don't need somebody that you pay $90,000 a year to run the facility. We pay
$200,000 a year in taxes towards that operation. So it's in Camden's best interests that they have somebody working over there that can make sure that that operation is running efficiently. Just in the time I've been there, I've already gotten a $250,000 grant to replace the production well. That wouldn't have happened if I was in there, and that probably would have trickled down back to the town of Camden, and our costs for taxes for our share of working for Midco Solid Waste would have gone up. I'm part of the community, and I also want to see that operation run correctly. That's why I'm doing it. I'll do it as long as I feel like I can do it and the town manager lets me do it. I'm not doing it under duress. I feel I'm good at it. And if it was a problem, I would say something.
And I guess
Can
this
I-
is similar to Jody's the bookkeeper for Midco Solid Waste. So, you know, there are agreements that we have because it's in Camden's best interest to keep things running well. And I have a lot of confidence in both Dave and Jody that one, they can do it. And two, if it ever became too much, they would tell me and we would make adjustments to change things.
Can I ask the question a little differently then? Just the question then that I would want to ask is, given this budget and given the staffing, the ability to delegate, do you have baked into this budget and the head count, what is needed to allow that delegation and that effort to take place? And is that part of what, I know obviously what your general planning happens, but does this budget reflect the right number of FTE allocation to?
I have my team, and the team is in this budget, and what I said I'm going to do in this budget is what I'm going to do, as long as it's approved. It's pretty much what it is.
I'll make,
Sorry, I just had a kind of question you're probably absolutely not available to do, but you know how you said all of the sand and stuff like goes off the side and you have to do all the digging?
Would you like some?
Well, that, I mean, I've used it before, but also I was like, is there a way that if we're spending so much on it, and I know it gets mixed in with a bunch of other stuff as well, but and because you've been to conferences and stuff, there's no way that that can be somehow
Reused?
or like, you know, I'm just trying to think,
gets-
how can we?
So what happens is it gets mixed in with the crumb rubber from the road, the silt, and it's contaminated at that point. It's not really sand anymore. It's kind of like a mush. So I don't want to put that back on the road because probably people would be upset with me. Yeah.
Filter it somehow, I don't know.
I've thought of it.
Yeah.
But you think about what would it take to do that? You'd need energy, right? You need to dry it. You need to sift it. You need to take the fines out. You're
I
talking,
was like, can we just like spread it out somewhere?
Courtney,
Big thing,
I've heard a
and
city
everyone
councilor in
just,
Rockland ask this exact same question.
I'm like,
Oh,
so
yeah.
how about that? If we have the space, I'm like, can't we just take it and dump it, and just leave it there for the winter, and then let this spread it out with our backhoe, whatever. That's just what my brain was doing.
one of the things you could do is you don't have to always treat all the roads. You could wait until all the snow is done and only go out and plow it. And then it would be like 1985 and you're driving on the hard packed snow again. Problem is when it melts, it turns to slush. Everybody's used to driving fast. Everybody's used to a bare road now. It's a hard thing to go back to.
So are there any other questions regarding the Public Works Department before we ask for motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Public Works budget per the town manager's recommendation.
I just want to
Second.
clarify the amount. So Public Works total, if you look at the total revenue, it includes the streets and sidewalks, parking lots, and tree program, which are on these following pages. So you're moving the 1,378,500 that's on the kind of more like the administrative sort of budget, just to clarify that that's the one that you're.
Yes, 1.3 million. Is that the one I should be looking?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew the amount. I mean, we probably could vote on the whole, but we haven't really,
Yeah, I was more thinking, right, so, well.
because we haven't talked about streets and bridges, or we have because we have Dave here and we've kind of,
I mean,
I'm just wondering.
I just don't know how, I mean, yeah.
Oh, I don't want
I mean,
to.
I was making the motion to this, but I think we have, I mean, I would make I don't know if it includes in the motion, but I would include the streets since we have spoken about paving and culverts and rent, but,
Tree
yeah,
program.
would that be one motion? That'd be two separate because it's two.
I mean, so on the revenue, or excuse me, the expenditure summary, it's 2,012,000 even. I mean, I'm just trying to.
So just to clarify, that means, because I do want to reserve, I feel like, time for next time in terms of the dams and like the.
Separate.
Yeah, that is,
This
that is
is-
separate. Okay, I just,
Mhm.
yeah.
Is
Okay.
that when you're gonna be here next week too? Will you be here next week, or are you not?
If you want me here, I'll
I'm
be
just
here.
thinking, like, if we're not going to
He
be.
can zoom in next time.
Yeah, if we're not gonna be doing a
Okay.
motion on all of
Then,
these
yeah.
things, can we just? then
It's
say-
totally up to you. You know, if you want, I mean, I'll be here if you want me here.
If we don't want to, if we still wanted to go through each thing, if we had questions, and we don't
Yeah.
have to do the whole thing.
Why don't we I'll make a motion just for the 1.3, the 1001? Is that to approve for the
Yes.
town manager's report
Yes.
recommendation?
And I seconded.
All in favor in the room? And then moving to Zoom. Oh, Ray, okay. And Peter Lindquist.
No.
And Mary Beth dropped off, so but we still have 6 of us. I know, okay, I'm a numbers person, you know, I gotta make it. All right. So, we're almost adjourning. We're really.
just move through, I mean, there's not new budgets.
There's not much.
Since we have been here, I mean, they're budgets, well.
Budgets, but they're,
Do you want to just do like highways, streets and bridges? And then next time do the
we
other?
kind of
I'm
talk.
gonna say that
Okay.
I'm saying it's 8:53. And I feel, and I'm just want to be mindful of your time that's here, but I mean, my sense is that with those that have dropped off and that it's almost 9:00, that we hold off on it. Does anybody, you agree?
So she's making a motion to adjourn. Is
I'm
that what
making
I'm
it.
hearing?
Make a motion.
Okay.
Yeah. Does anybody second that motion? Thank you so much. All right.
Welcome.
Are we allowed to?
Thank you all.
Can we do that?
Actually, if
Do you have any time for
if you would like to start earlier, yeah, we could, yeah, absolutely, we could notice it.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yep.
We've already lost, I think Peter's out. And Ray is still there too, so would everyone like, do we have a motion to move the meeting to 6?
We move our meetings to 6.
Okay, and all in favor? Okay, so that's unanimous. Do you have proxy for Andy? And Ray raised his hand. Thank you, Ray. Yeah, 6 PM. All right, so Audra will take care of whatever. Oh, good. I hope you're feeling well.
Yeah.
Good.
All right,